The Boston Bruins made a bit of a surprise signing on Wednesday with the addition of Jesper Boqvist. We're going to break down what that means for the roster, as well as discuss Nick Foligno's comments on being benched in Game 7, and a look at Jake DeBrusk's future here on today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Bee. Today is Thursday, July 13th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your day every single day. It's absolutely free to subscribe. All you have to do is go to your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Pocket Casts is what I use. Hit that subscribe button, download every day, and never miss a thing. The podcast is also available on YouTube, where you can watch in video form and see my cat Bessie make an appearance as she is doing here this morning. Hey, Bessie, say go Bruins. If you are on Twitter, Instagram, you can find the podcast at Locked NHL Bruins. We'll soon be on Threads. And you can find me, my dad jokes, hockey thoughts at ENC McLaren on Threads, Twitter, and Instagram. All right, let's get into today's episode, shall we? And let's begin with kind of an out-of-the-blue signing yesterday. The Boston Bruins announcing the addition of Jesper Boqvist to a one-year NHL contract with a very reasonable cap hit of $775,000. 24 years old, played 70 games with the New Jersey Devils this past season, recording 10 goals and 11 assists for 21 points in very limited ice time, I should add. He was a second-round pick in the 2017 NHL draft. Spent his entire career with the Devils, 28 goals, 27 assists for 55 points in 189 career NHL games. Now, we had all kind of thought that Don Sweeney was done. That, they were just waiting to get Trent Frederick signed, waiting to get Jeremy Swayman signed, waiting on decisions from Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. And here Don goes, adding Jesper Boqvist, a pretty talented 24-year-old who, again, was drafted in the second round by the Devils. So there's still some real upside there. He will turn 25 on October 30th. And yes, he did have modest totals this past season, playing in 70 games, but he averaged only about 11 minutes and 36 seconds of ice time, which was down from the previous year, where he averaged 13 minutes and 8 seconds and had 10 goals, 23 assists in 56 games. So you can see there, 20, 21, 22, a much better point per game average. And he was at 0.41 points per game that season. This past season, 0.3. Now, if you go by his per 60 stats, you get a bit of a different picture. This past season, 0.7 goals per 60, 0.8 assists per 60, 1.6 points per 60. Now, what that means is, with perhaps some more ice time, some more opportunities, he could very well be much more productive offensively. And looking at Dauber prospects, which is where I like to go to look at scattering reports, his NHL certainty was rated 8.8 out of 10. Fantasy upside for those interested in that, 7.8. They called him a potential top 9 forward with a 25 to 30 goal season. Hadi Kalechi, who hosts the Locked On NHL Prospects podcast, back in September of 2020 wrote, he's a very smart player. He has the skill set to make it as a full-time NHLer. Maybe a bit inefficient in a checking role, but like Anthony Duclair, he can thrive on scoring lines accompanied by skilled playmakers. So he never really got a chance to play with Nico Hischier or Jack Hughes in New Jersey. You could argue there's really no room for him in the top 6 here in Boston, but there could be some opportunities for him to play on the second line, because who knows who the left winger there will be with Pavel Zacha and David Pastrnak. Could be James Van Riemsdyk, but it very well could be Jesper Boqvist as well, if he finds a way to slide into that position. And given a bigger opportunity, could be a very, very good value signing for the Boston Bruins. Now, what does that mean for the Bruins and their depth chart? And is there room still to add these restricted free agents? Is there room still to add Patrice Bergeron? Well, yes, because you have a couple guys on the roster at the moment who are easily variable in Patrick Brown and Jason Megna. You could have a line of Bergeron, Marchand, DeBrusk, Zacha, Van Riemsdyk, Pastrnak, Coyle, Frederick, and Geeky, and then say who down the middle, Lucic, Lauko, and somebody from the AHL playing center down the middle instead of Patrick Brown. So there's still room. There's still possibilities here. Again, I just looked at the forward lines the other day, what they could look like. Right now, the Bruins have 5.429 in available cap space, but with Megna and Brown taking up about 1.5 million. So toss them in the AHL, open up some room. Swayman, 3.5. Frederick, 3.5. 1.5 for Frederick. 1 million for Bergeron. Let's get it done. And you have a pretty good looking forward core there for the Boston Bruins. So I really like this signing. Again, I had talked last week about how they should have looked at Philip Zadina, maybe mining some value there from past drafts with high upside. Boqvist fits into that camp. Obviously not as highly rated as a guy like Zadina, but still a pretty good value signing. Higher upside than Lucic for sure. Perhaps higher than James Van Riemsdyk at this point. We'll have to see how he performs. But interesting note, Boqvist selected 36th overall. Jason Robertson, Dallas, selected 39th overall. And he is one of the top scorers, if not the top scorer from that draft class at the moment. So never underestimate the little guys. The Bruins now have added 2 players from that draft. Morgan Geeky was drafted 67th overall and Boqvist 36th overall. Of course, what did the Bruins do at the 2017 NHL draft? They selected, let's just pull that up here. 2017 NHL draft, the Boston Bruins selected Urho Vakanainen, 1st overall, Jack Studnicka, 53rd overall, and then Jeremy Swayman. So now they could have, instead of Vakanainen and Studnicka, Boqvist and Geeky and Swayman in the lineup. Not a bad little haul there for the 2017 NHL draft. All right, we are going to discuss some comments made by Nick Foligno about being scratched in Game 7 of the series against the Florida Panthers. coming up after the break. Before that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Athletic Greens. Now, we've been talking about AG1 for a while here on the Locked On Network, and for good reason. It's a daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. And, people drink AG1 in the morning before working out, and it makes them feel unstoppable, ready to take on the day. All great athletes have one thing in common: they take care of their bodies, and a huge part of that starts with optimizing whole body health. A lot of them also drink AG1, and that's why I'm a huge fan. With every daily serving, you can set yourself up for success with 75 high-quality ingredients that give you key daily nutrition and support energy, focus, strength, and clarity. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL Network to check it out. Costs less than $3 a day. It's pretty good if you ask me. Very effective daily habit with high quality sourced ingredients. It really is a win-win. All right. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Boston Bruins part of your day every single day. Tomorrow on the podcast, we'll continue our off-season coverage and perhaps open up the mailbag once again. Got one question coming in today that we will discuss here in a moment. We're also going to start looking at next season. 3 things that could go wrong, that could go right, divisional outlook, etc. Look for that next week on the podcast. So Nick Foligno had a very good regular season for the Boston Bruins, really redeeming himself after a poor first season, and played the first 6 games against the Panthers in round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. 3 points in those 6 games, which is really perhaps more than you could have even asked or expected from him in the playoffs. But when Game 7 rolled around between the Bruins and the Panthers, Nick Foligno found himself on the outside looking in favor of Trent Frederic, who was in the lineup for some extra pop and energy. Nick Foligno has since signed with the Chicago Blackhawks, and he was recently on the Cam and Strick podcast, and Lauren Campbell, friend of the Locked On Bruins pod over at Matt's Live, transcribed what he had to say. And here it is. Quote, "That's something you don't prepare yourself for or even think is going to happen. It's something Monty, of course, Coach Jim Montgomery, and I discussed, and I'll keep that private, but it didn't sit well with me. And I think he knows that. It never will. When you're a competitor, this is the time of year you play for. That one didn't really sit well and never will." He continued, quote, "That was hard, especially to see your team go out there and play and you're dying to be part of it. It's just one of those games, do or die. So those are the ones you dream about and expect to be on the ice for. It's unfortunate it happened, but it's something that I've come to peace with, at least in talking to Monty about it. We've moved on, but it's something I hope to never have happen again." For me, it was end quote. For me, it was reminiscent of David Backes being scratched in Game 7 of the 2019 Stanley Cup Final, and I get there was good reason for that. Carson Kuhlman scored in Game 6. Backes simply didn't have it anymore, but I still wonder what kind of impact he could have had coming in there, playing in a Game 7 Stanley Cup Final, likely his last game if they win, playing against his old team, a team that he captained for several years. You just can't understate the adrenaline rush and the importance of having him in the locker room even. When you're scratched, you're up in the press box. We all remember Nick Foligno and his speech at the Winter Classic and how that spurred them on to victory. Having him up in the press box, just a waste of inspiration, a waste of leadership, and it was really unfortunate. And I feel bad that he was scratched. I don't think he deserved to be scratched. Trent Frederick wasn't particularly effective in that series either. In fact, he had 0 points in the 5 games in which he played. Again, Hall, Foligno were both effective. Hall set up Foligno's goal, and Foligno, I think, should have been in the Game 7 lineup. And he was forced to watch it from the 9th floor at TD Garden. And he said, quote, "At the end of the day, we just didn't get the job done. It's gut-wrenching because we probably had the best team I'll ever play on, or maybe ever. I give Sweens a ton of credit." That's GM Don Sweeney, of course. "We had one of the best teams I think you're going to see in a long time, the way it was assembled, the depth and the overall look of the group. We just had no weaknesses, and it's mind-blowing that we didn't get it done," end quote. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. It is mind-blowing still that the Bruins were unable to get it done. I've kind of come to a peace with it because it's been a couple months now. But you look back at the regular season they had, how deep the roster was in the playoffs. You've heard me say it before that I look at the lineup on opening night, I look at the lineup after the trade deadline, and then at the beginning of game 1, when everybody hopefully is healthy or maybe not, to assess the strengths of the team. And one of the reasons Foligno was scratched is because the team was so deep. They had so many options. Trent Frederick had scored 17 goals in the regular season. So there's an argument to be made for his inclusion in that Game 7. But again, you look at his intangibles on Foligno's side, his leadership, maybe his last crack at it now that, of course, that he's in Chicago. And you wonder what kind of impact he might have had. Anyways, I thought it was interesting what he was saying, and clearly wasn't happy about it. Apparently he's made peace. And, of course, he and Taylor Hall will be back at TD Garden October 11th as the Bruins open the season against the Chicago Blackhawks, including Connor Bedard, which should be must-see TV. All right, I'm going to answer the one mailbag question I got about the status of Jake DeBrusk and his contract extension potentially here in a moment. I'm going to talk about Birddogs here first, though, because Birddogs have changed my life. I got a couple pairs of their shorts earlier in the summer. Not only do they make my legs look great, but they fit way better than regular shorts that are made of stiff, restricting cotton. Birddogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. They have anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps me cool and dry all day long. I wore them to the beach a couple weeks ago, a really hot day, so comfortable, and got me through the day. Now, go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL, enter promo code LockedOnNHL for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL. Use promo code LockedOnNHL for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't take your bird dogs off, I promise. They are so very comfortable. All right, I got a question from listener John Sweeney, not to be confused with Don Sweeney. And he asked the following question. Do you think DeBrusk will get extended? Seems to be their type of player, but doesn't get mentioned as part of the new core. Curious. Now, Jake DeBrusk has 1 year remaining on his contract, an extension that he signed on trade deadline day a couple years ago. in the midst of a trade request. It was perhaps thought that that could act as a prompt to getting him moved, but it ended up keeping him in the mix for last season, this upcoming season, at a very reasonable cap hit of $4 million. He had a very productive 2022-23 with career high in goals, tied a career high in goals at 27, career high in points with 50, and that was in only 64 games. Remember, he had that injury during the Winter Classic that kept him out of the lineup for some time. He also had 4 goals, 2 assists for 6 points in 7 playoff games. I'm a real big fan of Jake DeBrusk. His game has really taken a turn since he was promoted to the first line. Now, if Patrice Bergeron isn't back this coming season, it will be interesting to see how well DeBrusk performs in a starting role without his center's kind of defensive buffering. If he can prove to be that still consistent, reliable scoring threat night in and night out, then there's no reason not to extend him. And hopefully they can get a deal done. DeBrusk has, like I said, really come around. He has more than proven that he was worthy of one of those first-round picks in 2015. 385 games played, 119 goals, and there's real potential this season to eclipse 30 and perhaps even push for 40 in a perfect world. But he had 27 goals in 64 games last season. 30 should be the baseline goal for this upcoming season. And yeah, he should be one of the core players at this point, seeing as he is one of the longer tenured guys. He was just outside the core guys in terms of overall scorers this past season. Among forwards, he ranked 6th behind Pastrnak, Marchand, Bergeron, Zacha, and Krejci. So he's a top 6 guy on this team. And if he continues to prove that this year, then there's no reason not to keep him around. 25 years old, really just hitting his prime. He'll be 26 on October 17th. So almost near his, he's entering his prime years. That's what I'm trying to say. And I expect a big season from him this year, and he will be compensated as such. Now, if the Bruins really fall apart this year, if it's becoming apparent that he's asking for more than they want to pay him, then perhaps he could be moved at the trade deadline to try to get a first-round pick or some sort of package back. But that's a worst-case scenario, and of course, we'll discuss that if and when it ever happens. All right, that's it for today's episode, my friends. Jesper Boqvist in the fold. I really like that signing. Nick Foligno lamenting being scratched in Game 7. And I have high hopes for DeBrusk this season. I traded for him in a keeper cap league, and I really hope that he can provide great value on that $4 million contract this season. Hope you are all having a great week. Please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll be back here tomorrow on Locked On Boston Bruins, because we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.